Hello everyone. This video is on how to devise formulas for number patterns. Now, before I begin, I just want to explain that a formula for a number pattern is different to a rule for a number pattern. A rule for a number pattern allows you to work out the next term in the pattern. But a formula enables you to work out any term in the pattern. So the formula is actually much more useful than just the rule. Okay, let's demonstrate with this first example that we have here. If we look at the first sequence or the first pattern that we've got here, we can see that it's a linear pattern. And if we have a look, we can see that as I go from one term to the next, I'm adding the same amount every time, and I am adding 5. 6 plus 5 gives me 11. 11 plus 5 gives me 16. 16 plus 5 gives me 21, and 21 plus 5 gives me 26. And I've made a little mistake there. That should be 5. So let's just change that to plus 5. So my rule for this first sequence is plus 5. This simply means that if I want to come up with the next term in the number pattern, I simply add 5. So what is the formula? How do we calculate the formula? Well, the first thing that we do is we write our number pattern again, but in a table. Now, down the right-hand side here, I'm going to write in the number pattern 6, 11, 16, 21, and 26. In the left-hand column, I'm going to put in the position of each number. And what I mean by that is I'm going to put 1 here because 6 is the first number in the pattern. 11 is the second number. 16 is the third, 21 is the fourth, and 26 is the fifth. So the left-hand column tells me the position of the number in the pattern, and the right-hand column tells me the numbers in the pattern. So we call the number T, and we call the position N. Now, the next thing that I do is I go back to the rule. Now, the rule here was plus 5. This tells me that this particular sequence or pattern is based on the 5 times tables. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write down the first 5 answers of the 5 times tables. And I'm going to write each answer next to each term in my pattern. So down here, I've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And the rule in my pattern, plus 5, gives me the first part of my formula. The first part of my formula is 5n, the 5 coming from the rule. To get the next part of my rule, I look at each answer to the 5 times tables here and compare it to the corresponding term that I have here. Now you can see that in my first term, it's 1 more than 5. 5 plus 1 gives me 6. 10 plus 1 gives me 11. 15 plus 1 gives me 16. 20 plus 1 gives me 21. 25 plus 1 gives me 26. So the next part of my rule is plus 1. I complete my rule by writing T equals here. So this is my formula for this particular number pattern. Now the beauty of this rule is that it allows me now to work out any term in the sequence. Say, for example, I wanted to find the 31st term in my pattern. Now, one way to do this would be to keep writing out each term in the pattern until I get to the 31st term and then read it off. Now, that's okay, but it takes a long time. So the best way to do it is to use my formula. Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 5 times 31 plus 1. 31 because I'm finding the 31st term. 5 times 31 gives me 155 plus 1, which means that my term is 156. So this tells me that my 31st term in this pattern is 156. Okay, let's look at our next sequence now, and we'll be much quicker this time. First of all, let's start with the rule. Here we have another linear sequence, and if we look at each term and the next term, we can work out our rule. Our rule here, 2 plus 8 gives me 10, so my rule is plus 8. Now, using what we did earlier, we know that this rule gives us the first part of our formula. So we know the first part of our rule, our formula is 8n. Let's work out the next part of our formula. Let's write our sequence down or our pattern down in our table. So we have 2, 10, 18, 26, and 34. On the left-hand side, I'm going to put in the position of each number. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And remember, T is for the term and N is for the position of the term. Now, remember, because our rule is plus 8, this particular pattern is based on the 8 times tables. So I'm going to write down the answers to the 8 times tables here. So I have 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40. So now to work out the next part of my formula, I'm going to work out the difference between 8 and 2. To get from 8 to 2, I'm going to have to minus 6. 8 minus 6 gives me 2. So the second part of my rule will be minus 6. And I complete my rule by putting in T is equal to 8n minus 6. So here is my rule or my formula. So if I check the second part of my formula on the rest of my terms, we'll see that it works. 16 minus 6 gives me 10. 24 minus 6 gives me 18. 32 minus 6 gives me 26. 40 minus 6 gives me 34. So the rule works. So now, say for example, I wanted to find the 50th term, the 50th term in my pattern. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to say 8 times 50 minus 6. Now 8 times 50 gives me 400. 400 minus 6 gives me 394. So this tells me that the 50th term in my number pattern is 394. Okay, now let's look at the last pattern that we have here. It's slightly different. We can see it's a decreasing pattern. And if we look at our rule now, we can see that to go from 8 to 6, we minus 2. It's the same for all the other numbers. As I go from one number to the next, I'm going to minus 2. So my rule here for this number pattern is minus 2. Now you can see down here, I have already put my number pattern into the table, and I've made sure that I've put in the position for each number as well. Now, because my rule here is -2, this means that this particular formula, our formula for this particular rule, the first part of it is going to be -2n. Okay? Now, it also means that it's based on the -2 tables. So I'm going to imagine a -2 times tables, and I'm going to write the answers, first 5 answers to the -2 times tables down here. So we've got -2, -4, -6, -8, -10. Now, to get the second part of our formula, let's work out the difference between -2 and 8. What do I need to add to -2 to give me 8? I need to add 10. So this is my formula for this particular pattern, and I complete the formula by putting in T is equal to -2n plus 10. Now, I could write this formula a slightly different way. I can write it this way. I can say 10 minus 2n. Now, with 10 minus 2n, it might be a little easier for you to work with. So now, with this formula, I can now work out any term that I particularly want. Say, for example, I want the 20th term in my sequence, the 20th term. I'm going to use my formula now. So my 20th term is going to be equal to -2 times 20 plus 10. Or it will be equal to 10 minus 2 times 20. That's a better way to put it. So what's 2 times 20? It's 40. So my answer will be 10 minus 40, which gives me -30. So for this particular pattern, my 20th term is -30. Now, I hope you found this tutorial useful, and now I would like you to go on with the work that I have set for you on devising formulas for number patterns. That work is on your OneNote. Thank you.